Hello everyone, I'm Alex Dykes, and on this week's child seat review, we're taking a look at the all-new 2015 Hyundai Genesis. Now, if you're amazed that you're looking at a Hyundai here, then go ahead and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos, including the full review of this 2015 Hyundai Genesis coming up in about a day or so. Now, this vehicle, it may look like it's designed to compete with something like a Chrysler 300, and I'm sure in the 3.8-liter version it does, but it also competes very directly with the Mercedes-Benz E-Class, the BMW 5 Series, the Lexus GS, as well as something like a Lexus LS, and perhaps even a 7 Series or Mercedes-Benz S-Class. I'm not going to dive too much into the vehicle specifics in this particular review. If you do want to know more, again, wait for the full review of the vehicle. But just so you know, this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, and we do have a 5-liter V8 right here under the hood, so it is very definitely a luxury-styled rear-wheel drive vehicle. In terms of general size, it should be obvious by this rear door here that the Genesis slots in somewhere between your traditional 5 Series and 7 Series in terms of overall size. And that does have an impact on the child seat accommodations right here in the back. The extra length is really helpful when trying to install a rearward-facing child seat like we have right here. And this was much more difficult in a Mercedes-Benz E-Class, for instance, because there wasn't as much room between the rear seat backs and the front seat backs. Now, if you do want a little bit more room and you still want a luxury Hyundai, Hyundai will be happy to sell you the Hyundai Equus, which does have a decent amount more room between these seat backs. If I move the child seat all the way over to the other side of the car, you can see that this child seat is now touching this front seat back, and that's because this seat is all the way back in its tracks. I had a 6'5" passenger in this seat, so you can see there isn't quite as much room behind this seat adjusted this way. As you'd expect out of a luxury vehicle, the latch anchors are very well hidden behind the seat back cushions right here, and you can't feel them when you're sitting in the seat. This is a little bit different than the Mercedes-Benz E-Class, where you can feel those latch anchors definitely in the seat. Now, we only have latchboard anchors for the 2 outboard passenger positions in the rear, although we do have a top tether anchor for the middle seat. Likely thanks to Hyundai's experience in the mass market, although I did have to remove these headrests in order for our particular child seats to fit easily. They do remove very, very easily right here in the back. And the top tether anchor is a very nice design, very easy to insert and remove the top tether anchor right there. That's not something you see in some of the German vehicles, which do have strangely shaped top tether anchors. I now have 2 child seats inserted in the Genesis, and as you can see, there's a decent amount of room back here. It is relatively comfortable to sit next to these two, and buckling yourself in really isn't a problem. This child seat is almost on top of my seatbelt buckle, but not quite, so there is enough room for these Graco Classic Ride 50 child seats and 1 adult right here. One nice touch is that these top tether anchors that I do have inserted right here are relatively far away from the child seat themselves. That does make it a lot easier to actually insert the child seat with the top tether anchor inserted properly. A lot of vehicles, the top tether anchor is too close to the child seat in order to pull this strap and have them nicely installed in the car. Although installing 3 child seats across the back of some luxury vehicles is a problem, it really wasn't in the Genesis. That's because it is relatively wide right here in the back. One thing to note is that the center seat is a decent amount up and forward versus the outboard seats. These are decidedly bucket-shaped seats. That's why you see that this center child seat does seem a little bit higher and a little bit further forward than the outboard seats. However, it is still very easy to install the seats, close the door, etc. And I still have a decent amount of room between the seat and the door, which is good for a side impact event. When it comes to cargo capacity, the Genesis has a very generously sized trunk. Now, it's not furnished quite as nicely as you'll find in the competition, so this carpet right here does seem to pill a little bit. So if you do find an available cargo rug, you may want to choose that for your Genesis. We still have all the toys you expect out of a luxury vehicle, like a self-closing trunk lid, however. Let's go ahead and pull these bags out. Right here I have a 26-inch roller bag and a 24-inch roller bag. Those fit in there, of course, very easily, as you'd expect from a trunk this size. Let's see how well the child seats fit. With the first child seat out of the vehicle, you can tell that this trunk opening is very large, very tall, very wide, etc. So it's very easy to fit bulky items right here in the trunk, although it does narrow a decent amount towards the back. So it is a little bit difficult to get these child seats all the way back into the back. The hinges are covered right here, so you don't have to worry about hinges impacting your luggage. Here we have child seat number 2. And there we have child seat number 3. Let's see how many of these bags we can insert right back into here. I suspect we will easily be able to accommodate both of them. As you can see, with some gentle persuasion, I was able to fit 3 child seats, a 24-inch roller bag, and a 26-inch roller bag right here into the trunk. And I'm fairly sure that this trunk lid will actually close. Apparently I'm bad at packing. Let's try that again. And as it turns out, I'm wrong. I probably just haven't packed this trunk right, because it honestly looks like there's enough room in there if I were actually able to pack things correctly into the trunk. Either way, this is a relatively generous trunk, especially when you compare it to some of the smaller entries in this segment. The Lexus GS doesn't have nearly as much room in its cargo area as the Genesis does. One last thing to consider when it comes to cargo carrying capacity is that the Genesis, even at this $55,000 fully loaded model, which has the over 400 horsepower 5-liter V8 engine in it, is actually a decent buy when you compare it to a BMW 3 Series or a Mercedes-Benz C-Class, because it is possible to get your 3 Series or your C-Class up to nearly $55,000 if you add all those options. A lot of those options are standard on this Genesis. So you get real wood trim, the heads-up display, radar cruise control, all that kind of stuff you do get in the Genesis, and you also get a bigger back seat and a much bigger trunk. So on that value proposition, do pay close attention to the Genesis if you are out there shopping for a German luxury car, or even a Scandinavian luxury car or a Japanese luxury car in the compact, midsize, or even the full-size segment, because the Genesis competes incredibly well. It's going to give you more bang for the buck, more room for the buck than that compact entry. Definitely a little bit more room and definitely more value than the mid-size segment, and an awful lot more value for a tiny amount less room than the full-size luxury segment. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2015 Hyundai Genesis. Go ahead and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos. You can also find me over at facebook.com/alexandautos. Email your questions to alex@alexandautos.com, and I'll see you next week.